Okay, Jim, we're all set.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today. I'm Jim Tisch, and I work within the Agile Management BU at CA Technologies, and we're happy to provide today's webcast. Before we start, we just have a few housekeeping items to review quickly. First, please submit questions to the questions button, and we'll take questions at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to all of them, we'll have them answered by Doug and follow up with you one-on-one. After the webcast, there will be an email sent out to you with the recording of today's webcast as well. So now it's my privilege to introduce our speaker, Doug Page. So Doug is an advisor here at CA, specializing in project portfolio management, and he has experience working with customers around the world to ensure they maximize the benefit of their portfolio management initiatives. He has an MBA from the John Molson School of Business in Montreal. And this morning, Doug will be talking to us about application portfolio management, so we can learn about application portfolio rationalization, how to identify redundancies within your applications in order to maximize value. For example, a few questions. Does your organization understand your current application spend, support dollars, and total cost of ownership for the applications that run your business? Or are you getting the total value out of your applications? So, Doug, we're excited to hear from you today discussing this important topic. I'm going to send it over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm just going to jump over to the next slide here. One of the ways that I like to start talking with clients around application portfolio management is the why. Why are clients doing this? And those tend to fall into one or more of these three areas that we see on this slide. When we're talking with clients, many of them are in this circle on the bottom right. They're really in what they call a rationalization exercise. That's specific terms that they have. It's very focused on cost cutting. It might even be something that's run by a CFO, something that's very financially focused. And then on the top is something that's very related but tends to have a different lens to it. It's about reducing cost but also reducing complexity and a simplifying of IT. And this is a similar exercise but generally run by an enterprise architecture team. It tends to be much more bottom-up from a data model perspective rather than looking at a top-down approach that you would have from a straight rationalization exercise. And the idea here is to really simplify the underlying architecture of IT. So looking at how many different versions, let's say of Oracle, we're running across the organization. And of course, to do that, we need to have all the applications and understand that underlying architecture. And then finally, we have a lot of customers who are also interested, or they might be just only interested in risk management. And this is, very often seen in financial institutions, public sector as well is also very interested in this as well. And what you see on the right-hand side when we talk about value, the term value is used in the session today, is we spend a lot of money as IT organizations on applications and the run rate of IT. And Forrester says that, on average, and obviously it changes by industry, but on average, we're spending 72% of our spend on keep the lights on activities. So when we talk about value, it's like what value are we getting from that and how, if possible, can we reduce that run rate to free up money either to make the organization more efficient and spend less, or to spend that money on innovation, things that are going to make the organization more competitive. And then when we talk about risk on the left-hand side, you'll see this quote from the Economist Business Unit, and they say that business executives rank the threat of IT failure ahead of other such things that grab headlines like terrorism, natural disaster, or regulatory constraints. So the thinking behind risk management of an IT organization is very important. One of the customers that I've worked with a lot over the last few years is the Canadian federal government. They are managing all of their application portfolio, which is about 16,000 applications, within CAPPM. This is an initiative that's run through Treasury Board, which is appropriate because at the same time that they manage all the spending for the federal government, they are also responsible for the IT direction for the federal government. And then if you look at their data model, it's really summarized in these 3 boxes that you see on the left-hand side. So their data model for the federal government is just under 200 fields per application that they capture. And that includes a large amount of classifications, you can imagine. And so they're referring to this as a business outcomes approach, which applications are related to which outcomes of the organization. And then they have the middle piece here is an aging IT assessment. So you could think of this as risk. In their assessment for this, they capture at the same time the mission criticality of each of those applications because they're very interested in the relationship between those two. You may be okay accepting a little bit more risk if the application is very tactical. It's something that is not required for the day-to-day operations of the organization. And finally, on the right-hand side, they have what they call a lifecycle management questionnaire, which for those who are familiar with it, it's really the Gartner time questionnaire or methodology around application lifecycle management, which will really categorize each of the applications into that time methodology, which is tolerate, invest, migrate, or eliminate. So quite a well thought out methodology for doing that. And then I included their definition just because that's important, not that their definition is correct, but most organizations are interested in understanding what definitions of other organizations use, and I tell organizations it's important that they themselves have a definition. It doesn't have to be this one, but you need a definition because when you go out to the organization and you start collecting this data, you don't want to be comparing apples to oranges. So you do need a well-defined definition of an application before you start creating that inventory. And then the outcome that they have, which matches quite well to what we're talking about today, is they want an IT investment plan that best meets the business objectives while having an acceptable level of risk at a reasonable cost, which is in itself almost the definition of value. Deliver the most value with the least amount of risk. And then this is a view that they use to look at risk versus criticality. And the Canadian federal government actually has a whole action plan. So their processes around this are not just to view the applications and say, okay, now we understand where things sit. They actually drive actions based out of what they're seeing. So you can see in this graph on the left-hand side, they have the x-axis is the criticality. So as you move to the right, things become more critical. And then as you move higher, there's a higher risk level. So for things that are critical, there are always some actions to take. Even if the risk is low, you're still deemed to be required to take a minimal action. That basically means ongoing monitoring of that application has to happen. But if you have a high level of risk, you're going to be required to put an aging IT action plan into place to make sure that this application is properly reviewed or mitigated from a risk perspective. And the types of things that they ask in this detailed questionnaire would be things like, does the vendor still support this application? Do we have the resources with an understanding of this technology? Is it easy to find resources in the marketplace that understand this technology? A very long series of questions that will give them a score on the risk level of that specific application. And as they go through these assessments, this is just a view directly out of CAPPM that says we maintain the historicals. So most organizations are doing an annual assessment of their application. That seems to be a pretty standard period. Any more than that is too laborious and maybe not providing, it doesn't change fast enough. If you don't do it every year, then you're probably missing out on some large changes that might be happening. That being said, if you have a new application that gets entered, you probably want to score it as it comes in, so it's up to date and has information on it compared to the other applications. But we do maintain all that history. And then the other view that we talk about a lot, because what's interesting is when we talk to clients who are interested in application portfolio management, and you see there, these are people who are already working in this space. They spend, I would say, probably about 95% of their time, effort, thinking in this top box, which means they're defining a definition for application. They're defining the methodology that they want to use to evaluate the applications. They're collecting the data. They're analyzing the data. They're making decisions. So what comes out of there is a list of applications that they may want to retire and migrate. They spend very little effort in actually tracking those decisions. The nice thing about CAPPM, this is a tool that is purpose-built for managing projects. So having the ability to then say, we've decided to retire this application, I'm going to track that as a project that's built from a specific template that has all the predefined activities that our organization wants to go through when we retire an application, such as migration of users, assessment of what's going to happen with the current data, all of these things that you would do. You want to make that a repeatable process. The other thing that makes this valuable from being part of a PPM solution, there's a big difference between tagging an application for retirement, meaning I want to retire this application, versus actually having the time and the money to retire that application. You don't automatically turn off 50 applications in one quarter. So what we can do within CAPPM is to take those tagged applications and create unapproved projects from that activity. Those unapproved projects go through our regular portfolio management process to say, how does this cost savings project of retiring this application compare with other things that the organization wants to do? So we may have tagged 50 applications, but next year we may only be able to get to 22 of those, for instance, and then follow those through. And then as soon as that project completes, we have a workflow that validates that that application is actually retired. We're not running it on our systems anymore. Then we can finally come back to the application and modify the life cycle to show that that application is indeed now retired. It doesn't get retired when you make the decision, is what I'm trying to say. And I'm just, before I hand it back to Jim, I'm just going to actually bring us into the application to show you some of what we do directly within CAPPM to help manage this. So the first thing to point out is a while ago, we actually came up with an accelerator for application portfolio management. So what I'm showing you today is out of the box, meaning the fields are already there. You can literally collect your inventory and start populating the data. That's not to say that clients don't want to extend that data model. There are good reasons where you may want to take what we deliver out of the box and then add specific fields to it that may be required because they're specific to your organization. That's very normal. So what we see here is a list of applications. This is really our inventory, and this is a simplified view, but it shows you some of the primary information that we're collecting and managing around the application. We have the application name itself, who's managing that application. You can see the third field, the stage. We're actually showing you where each of these applications is within the life cycle. So at the same time as we're procuring one application, we're maybe retiring another. So we can specifically see here all those applications in their life cycle. We can see the mission criticality level, and that might change over time. This is something that we collect with every annual assessment. And you'll just see that within our model, at the lowest level, there's tactical applications. This could be like it could be, you know, like maybe a print application or something like this. If that stops working, our customers can still buy from us. People can still process things with our organization. The next level is mission essential, and that was put into place because with most of our clients, we found at an enterprise level, they have a very strict definition of what is mission critical, meaning what are the top primary applications that really drive our business, that if they go down, we have an issue with our customers. And what we found, though, is if you go down to the departmental level, they might say, listen, our 3 most important applications didn't meet that criteria at the enterprise level, but still very important to us. So this mission essential qualification allows you to be able to capture that, to say there's got to be an in-between between enterprise, mission critical, and tactical, and that's what that is. And then we've got a value score, a technical score, and a risk score. Those are coming from the assessments. And then we have a two-tier categorization. So you may have your own categorization, that's fine. A lot of customers are using, in addition to just a categorization, they're also use a capability mapping. We can support that as well. And then the last two fields that we're tracking here is the application source, to say, is this something that we built in-house? Is this a COTS application? That's going to be important when we're looking at retirement, because what they may say first is, we may want to focus our retirement effort on homegrown solutions, because we know that's where we're spending a lot of money internally, and that's where our direction is to start getting rid of some of those applications, as well as the installation type. If it's in the cloud, those are probably sitting where we're going from a strategic point of view. So we may want to focus on applications that are on-premise. So we have the ability to filter against all of these views. And then this next view here, for those that are familiar with the Gartner time, this is where we would embed that. We don't deliver Gartner time out of the box because it's not our intellectual capital, but we do implement it for most of our clients because it is the most used methodology when we're working with clients. And many of them have already been working with Gartner with that, and they're looking for a technology solution like CAPPM to provide a lot of governance around that, or they come to us and we say, are you guys Gartner customers? Well, you should probably use the Gartner time model, and we embed that. Out of the box, we include a very simple model, but our recommendation is generally that you look to Gartner time or a fully recognized model that's used in the marketplace, and there are others as well that we have worked with. And what this allows us to do, for those that aren't familiar with Gartner time, is to be able to put all of the applications in 4 quadrants here. So I'll just run through each of these. If we're in the top left, meaning that we have a low value score, but we have a high technical score, it means IT is totally happy with this. They don't have a problem where this sits on from an architectural perspective, but the customer who uses this application is not too fond of it. This is what Gartner calls tolerate. You might as well just leave that. We're not focused on there right away. The top right is where we want to invest. IT loves the application. The business loves the application. This is where we should be spending money, bringing on new users, making sure that platform is getting used to the best degree that we can leverage it. On the bottom right, we have an example where we've got a good value score. So the business actually is getting a lot of value out of this application, but IT doesn't like where this sits from an architectural perspective. That's a migration. Could be a migration internally to upgrade to a new version that might support technology that IT would like, or those could also be migrations to the cloud. We have a lot of customers of ours that sit on older versions of CAPPM, and they're like, well, we're not supporting this version of Oracle anymore. Instead of upgrading to the latest version, then we might just take them straight to the cloud and take those problems away. And then finally, what you see on the bottom left is a situation where we have a poor value score and we also have a poor technical score. That's what Gartner refers to as eliminate. These are what you could consider low-hanging fruit. Those are kind of no-brainer things that we should be eliminating. But what we do here for context is to provide the ability to filter this view, because this is fairly simple right now. We're not looking at a lot of applications, but you can imagine federal government, 16,000 applications, even most organizations we're working with, you're talking at least a few hundred, if not a few thousand applications. So you probably want to start filtering this by some type of category where you're looking for redundancy. For instance, how many document management systems do we support as an organization? If you talk about value, you're not delivering a lot of value just by procuring additional document management solutions. So although the bottom left is considered that eliminate, there's actually eliminate possibilities all around this in all quadrants. If you're going to consolidate onto a single document management platform, you might be taking out document management systems that are even on the top right. If there's 2 on the right and 4 others everywhere, and you go down to 1, this is easily going to show you that. But you could also look, if you want to filter just for the on-premise apps and say, in this analysis, we're not going to focus on anything in the cloud. It allows you to do that. So you can really hone in on the applications that you want to focus on. And if you scroll down, this view also shows you those 4 quadrants in a table view. So you can quickly see what are the applications that fit into each of those quadrants. The next view here is looking at mission criticality. So if you look at these two pie charts, and we're going to start on the one on the right, it's really showing you accounts. So how many applications do we have that are typical mission critical? And on the left-hand side, we're actually looking at spend against each of these categories. And that's important from a perspective of risk. If we're talking about risk, we really want to understand what % of our spend is against mission-critical apps. If that's very large, we have more exposure. So being able to quickly access that information is important. And then coming over here, when we start looking at rationalization, we can provide very quick access to information like on the top left, how much am I spending by application source? How much am I spending in-house versus costs? Most organizations, they're trying to reduce what they're spending in-house. They're trying to do more off-the-shelf, things that are going to deploy faster, things where they can get updates based on best practice in the marketplace. And on the right, they're also looking at how can we increase our spend in the cloud and decrease our on-premise spend. So they can follow this over time. They may even want benchmarking against the industry to say, how are we doing versus moving to the cloud versus other organizations. This is a listing of applications as well, but I'll just refer to some of the information that we have on the right-hand side. If you go straight over to the right-hand side, it can also capture how many users they have per application, what are the number of licenses, so they can see unused versus overused license count, and also even things like contract dates. And that's important because we are trying to take this away from a theoretical exercise to a very practical exercise. A good example of that is you might have an application that from a Gartner time assessment looks like an eliminate. But when you look at the contract, you might say, we just renewed this contract for 3 years. We just signed it last month. That's probably not the application to retire. We might want to filter that and say, show me all the applications that become due in 6 months from now, because it's going to take me at least 6 months to make that decision and retire that application and either have them moved on to a different system or acquire another system for them to go on to. So you need to have some real information like this that's going to help you, because if you retire it, doesn't mean the cost has come out if you've already committed to it. So having this information is also going to be very useful when it comes to doing this kind of assessment. And then if we talk about those retirements themselves, we help clients categorize, because not all retirements are the same. When you retire an application, you're really doing one of 3 things. The first thing that you're doing is a decommission, which means we're just shutting the system down. It's so poorly used that we're not even migrating users to another solution. We're just shutting it down and no one's going to care. That's bad if that happens, but it does happen. And that's pretty good actually from a cost perspective. The next is a consolidate. We have 2 document management systems. We're going to close down one and move everyone over to this other existing solution. That's also pretty good. And then the third type is a replacement. Someone says, we're getting rid of one application that's on-premise, but they didn't tell you they're actually buying a new application that's in the cloud to replace it. It's important to keep track of those. We consider those replacements. So if you look on the right-hand side, this pie chart on the right, it basically tells us in green, 33% of the applications that we want to retire, we're replacing with new applications. So that kind of sets off a bit of alarm bells right there. And then if we go to the pie chart on the left, it shows us 73% of the cost of all the applications that we want to retire are applications that are being replaced. That is troubling. Unless we can replace those applications with things that are cheaper, our rationalization exercise is not actually going to deliver that much cost savings. Someone might say we retired 200 applications last year. Surprisingly, we didn't save that much money. So being able to track that retirement strategy is very important. The other nice thing that happens within CAPPM, because of the fact that we have both applications and projects, is our ability to deliver roadmaps. Something that Gartner tells their clients is the day of looking at just a flat list of projects is gone, because that's not very relevant for the clients of the project. What people actually want to see is a roadmap view of projects. So show them to me by either application or product, depending on the terminology that you're looking at. So I tell clients, even if they're not ready to jump in with an application portfolio management exercise within CAPPM, within our solution, bring the list of your applications and align your projects to those applications so that you can start creating these roadmap views, which is what people are probably producing today in PowerPoint or Excel manually. Every time someone asks for an update, they have to go around, find out all the dates for all the projects, and try and piece this together like a puzzle versus having this produced automatically at the push of a button. A lot of value there. We started delivering out-of-the-box reports that show roadmaps as well. So a lot of interest from clients around that element. As well as, you know, besides just having the application to project, if we're talking about a development project, we can go from a product or application to the project that's evolving, retiring, bringing that application online, right down to a feature level. So you can create detailed roadmaps, whatever type of roadmaps you need to be able to share that information. And Jim, I think I'm going to stop there for now, and if you want to take over for a moment, and you can go through your content and we can open up for some questions.
That sounds great, Doug. Thank you very much. We can just go back to the presentation here. So I just want to take a moment to remind everybody about CA World. That is an event that's happening next week in Las Vegas, and so we're excited about the event. We have some great presentations and training that's going to occur, you know, even in the aspect of agile management. And so as we expand in our depths of agile at CA, we're offering training courses and certifications in that area at CA World for the first time, which is fantastic. But there's some really great sessions being held at CA World on PPM on a lot of different aspects of the technology, the roadmap, product management is going to be speaking, and a lot of people like Doug getting into the depths of the product and where we're headed. And so if you can attend, please do so. We look forward to seeing you there. There's a couple questions, Doug, that I want to bring up that have come from those listening in. The first one is, what is included in the Portfolio Accelerator?
So that's a good question. So the Accelerator, all the views that I showed while I was in the system are all part of that Accelerator, as well as the underlying data model. So, and I'm not sure who asked the question how familiar they are with CAPPM, but when we actually go into the details of an application, all those fields are there to fill out, that automatically populate all those dashboards that we were looking at. There are some other fields as well that I didn't get into the details of, but you could track certifications on applications. And then you have detailed, I showed that one screenshot in the PowerPoint, you have details of all the assessments from all the years. And those are actually handled fairly nicely where you can have due dates for those assessments and actually track them within the solution. So there's a good data model directly out of the box that's included with all the views. And the application portfolio management accelerator also includes 2 out-of-the-box reports. There's one that it does show the risk versus mission criticality. And for current customers who are used to seeing, we have a report out of the box that's been there for a very long time, which is KPIs by project type. We now have a mirror of that for applications. So there's application KPIs by application type. So same look and feel, so there's commonality throughout the tool, but basically for people who want to see the status of applications.
Thanks, Doug. There's another question from Mike, and he's asking about how were the projects associated with applications in the roadmap views?
So again, this will depend on how familiar people are with CAPPM, but within the solution, we have within all the different types of investments, whether it's a project, a program, an application, a service, or an asset, there is a hierarchy functionality. So that is done just by creating that link through the hierarchy itself.
Doug, another question, which is how do customers ensure data is collected properly in the system?
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces to that. The first is to make sure that people really understand what is going on. The federal government did a great job of this. They did education up front. They had detailed documentation that really explained each of the fields, what the criteria were, what it meant to fill in each element properly. So there was direction and guidance on population data. The other piece is to make sure that you get quick approval of those assessments. A story that they had, they tried this several years ago as kind of a first attempt. And the unfortunate mistake that they made is they collected the data, they analyzed it, they made decisions, and then they went back to the client and they said, here's the list of applications that we want to retire. And then all of a sudden, executives on the business side came out of the woodwork and said, I've never seen this assessment, I don't agree with it, there's no way in hell you're going to retire that application. So what they did when they implemented CAPPM to support this process was they used our workflow functionality to say, as soon as someone says they're completed with filling out that assessment, look to the executives from each of those business units to approve that assessment, to say, I agree with this assessment. So when they came back, that led to some good governance of data because people knew that it was going to be reviewed by executive management within their BU. And then it also helped with decision making. So once the decisions came,
Hey, Doug. I think you started getting garbled here. We can't hear you.
Chris, it sounds like
Hey, Doug. Doug, we may have lost you, I think.
it's happening with so it must be an issue with the WebEx with the call. So let's do this then.
Hey, Tim?
Yeah.
Actually, it was Doug, so I just had to mute him. Sorry, folks.
Why don't we, if you don't mind, please post your questions that you have, additional questions to the community or to Doug here. We'll answer those questions for you, make sure they're answered, and we will get this presentation sent out as well. So it looked like we had a phone issue on Doug's end, so we do apologize. Chris, anything else to add to that?
No, let's try opening up Doug's line real quick and see if he's back, and otherwise we'll have to stop where we're at.
Okay.
Jim, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you got garbled there.
Yeah, it's better now.
Sorry, folks. All right, Doug, you were probably saying quite a few things, and we didn't catch it. It got all messed up.
So what was the last part around the governance of the data? You can tell me if you heard me talk about having good definitions for what people were completing, and then have approval of those assessments as early as possible, so if there's buy-in when the decisions come out later.
Doug, there's a question here on just to move on, Doug, on that. There's a question on a training guide. So is there a training guide on how to set things up? Gwen's asking that question.
There is some documentation on on CA DocOps around the Accelerator, but if somebody has some specific questions, they can feel free to email me directly at douglas.page@ca.com, and I can either help answer their questions or point them in the right direction.
Okay, perfect.
And then I do see the question of where it lives. Now, generally, yes, it's within IT that's taking ownership of this because they're kind of responsible for that, for running all these applications. Where in IT, it kind of just depends on where it comes from. Very often it tends to be, as I said, more CFO focused. You'll see like most of the public sector organizations that we've worked with have actually had legislation, like State of Texas, Government of Canada, that specifically says they're going to do rationalization, and they tend to be a lot more wordy in what they're saying there. But this is something that comes legislative, so it tends to be organized by someone very high up within the organization. But sometimes it's within enterprise architecture. It really just depends on what the focus is. If it really is kind of big picture, we just want to reduce the number of applications, then maybe it makes sense to be more financially focused, because when you get into the EA world, you tend to get into a much more complex data model that will probably take more time to implement. There's nothing wrong with that approach. It's just a lot of organizations are looking at really just getting a handle on what they have and how they can reduce it. If you're going to do that, then I would keep the model high level. But there's no right or wrong answer there. It really just depends. You just have to match it to someone in the organization that's going to match to the objectives of the initiative.
Doug, just a few more questions here. For example, do customers use our data model, or do they use their own?
Yeah, so I would say, it tends to be a mix. We've set up this data model within CAPPM so that it's kind of like Lego pieces. So even if you don't use our assessment, you can still use the out-of-the-box views and plug in your assessment underneath that. And we're using, for those who are familiar with our technology, we're using configuration to do that. So that's reasonably straightforward, I would say. So generally, they're trying to use, if at a minimum, our out-of-the-box data model, and then expanding that where there is a need to have specific data elements that aren't part of ours. Unfortunately, application portfolio management is not like project portfolio management, that you can kind of have 80, 90, even 100% out of the box. For organizations doing application portfolio management, there are always going to be categorizations that we can't anticipate coming in, because each organization is different on how they want to categorize and manage their applications. But the good thing is we do have a flexible data model, and it's easy to extend our data model to capture those.
Perfect. Thanks, Doug. And the very last question here before we wrap this up would be, how does this link with our Agile methodology?
So that's an interesting question. When we're working with clients who, from an Agile perspective, and we're helping them support Agile development teams and showing them how they can link that into the projects, they tend to have a view of just those applications or products that they're developing. But if we take a step back, and now we're the CIO, they're responsible for all applications. So if you look at it, maybe subset's the wrong word because it kind of minimizes the importance of the Agile piece, but that really is, from a conceptual point of view, what we develop in-house is a subset of all the applications that we manage. And if you're a client of those applications, or if someone's running all the projects, they need to be able to see everything. The CIO and the client doesn't care if this is an application that we're delivering in-house, or it's CAPPM in the cloud, and we've got a project to upgrade it and deliver new functionality. Somebody wants to see in one place all of those activities, and that is a singular roadmap. So for customers, what we do is we don't separate those. We bring those together and just say you're going to have one singular view. Obviously, you're going to have a lot more detail and a lot more management around those things that you're doing Agile development, but you still want to have that visibility to those COT solutions or even those SaaS solutions, just so that you can have a singular roadmap for clients. Yeah, and again, just to remind everyone, it's for CA World this year, we have a lot that we're doing with Agile management and Agile in general. And so if you're coming to CA World, please come by the Agile sessions, booths and so forth to kind of learn what we're doing on that front. That's
the questions that we have today, Doug and Chris. And Doug, I just want to say thank you very much for taking your time to present this today. It's been very informative. And to the community and the customers that are listening, we'll make sure that you get this presentation. And at that, Chris, if there's any last things you want to talk about, please do so. If not, we can say thank you and end it.
No, I think we're all set. Thank you, everybody, for joining today.
Thank you.